Hey, David, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super grateful to be here. I follow your podcast every week, and I think you're doing so much for the sales community around the world. So thank you for having me, first and foremost.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm in commercial real estate. I'm what you would call a commercial office leasing agent, and I work for the largest and most sophisticated commercial real estate service firm in the world, CBRE Canada.
Yeah.
So effectively, what I do is I help companies negotiate anything when it comes to their office space. If they need to renew, if they need to expand, if they need to enter a new marketplace as their company grows, I'm helping them on the transaction side of their commercial real estate needs. I also act as a conduit to the CBRE platform. Companies sometimes need to strategize in advance of looking for space, figure out what their future workplace might actually need to look like.
Yeah.
And they might also need help once the transaction is completed, stuff like project management and construction management. So I'm kind of the first point of contact for someone who needs to think about real estate. I do the transaction, but sometimes I might say, let's help with something first or let's help with something after.
And how'd you get into commercial real estate?
I actually had a bit of a nonlinear path to start. I graduated McGill University in 2009, and from there, I became a professional poker player for about 4 years, actually.
Really?
Yeah, and I kind of knew that I didn't want to do that forever,
Really?
but I was,
Didn't have a
yeah,
retirement plan?
yeah. Well, no, exactly, and you couldn't really, you had to sit at the table and earn every dollar just like you earned the last one. There was no path to scale. That was actually one of the reasons that I didn't see it as a long-term career path. But out of poker, I got a job at a company called Career Builder,
Yeah,
which it's like
sure.
I don't even remember what they do, quite frankly.
Yeah,
But in
it's a
any event, I
job
did that
board.
for, yeah, job board, exactly. So I
Yeah,
was in sort of an inside sales job there for about 6 months,
yeah,
and it didn't jive with me too well. And then as I started to really think about a career at the age of 25, I was fortunate to actually meet some people in real estate through prospecting when I was at Career Builder. And I reached out to a couple CEOs of some commercial real estate service firms, CBRE and Cushman and Wakefield, and I actually asked them for a job, and they kind of liked my path. It's a 100% commission sales job,
yeah.
so I think they liked that I was in this role where I was used to actually losing and winning money on a monthly basis. They thought, okay, maybe this guy can do it. And I just admittedly, I took a little bit of a leap of faith, thinking, okay, I guess I'll try this out. It seems to have some of the backbone of what might be good for me.
And what's the sale like?
Yeah, so it's very diverse. I mean, we work with companies that need two desks in a co-working space, all the way through to helping companies consolidate millions of square feet into a new office development.
Yeah.
We help companies open offices all around the world, right? So it's super multifaceted, and the type of people that you work with and the stage of maturity that these organizations are at is so different. So you really have to be quite a chameleon in terms of how you develop the business and actually how you guide that client through the process of negotiating a deal.
And do you have assigned accounts? Is that how it works, or is it?
No, so that's a great question. So we are like, it's like the Wild West in
Yeah,
commercial real estate. So we have no centralized CRM in Canada for prospecting, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Because effectively, we don't even know who our colleagues are prospecting half the time. We have to figure it out through trial and error. And because we're a very geographically oriented business, in that our sort of expertise lies in the area that we actually live and work.
yeah.
Unless you can't really call anyone in, I can't call down to the US and, advise on real estate. I have to do it here. So we
Because
end
you
up
need to
actually,
meet them and get to know
yeah,
them.
you need to meet them, and then you also need to actually have local expertise, right? You have
Yeah,
to know the
know the
market.
market.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what are rents and what are concessions and
what's
where's space,
available.
what's
Yeah,
available, all that. So it's a very local job. It has us butting heads inside the organization quite often. So
yeah.
you can choose to take that one of two ways. You can be competitive about it, or you can be collaborative about it. I choose to be collaborative, but it's a great question because we just don't have a way of actually
So, so,
tracking who's
so what
after what.
happens if you're calling the CFO, the COO, and the person in the next office is calling the CEO?
Yeah, so usually what'll end up happening is we will find out from the client. They'll say, hey, I'm talking to so and so, and it then becomes a question of whether or not you can find a way to collaborate with your colleague and work together. Ultimately, you take less share of commissions in those situations, obviously, because you're splitting the pie further.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, people say, hey, I'm a little bit further along than you are. Why don't you back off? Like, that's kind of the way it works. It's a crazy environment from that perspective.
So do you have like those sit downs like on The Sopranos where you're like PD and
Actually,
Polly and
you know what's funny that you make that joke, but yeah, like, and frankly, when you get started in this industry as a younger person, older people that have been doing it a while, they try to see like how far they can push you. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So early in my career, in the first few years, I'd trip over other people's clients, or I'd trip over prospects that they had some
right.
connection to,
Someone's
and you'd
calling
go,
them, right?
yeah, right,
And it's
and
a
you'd go into
timing
the,
thing.
yeah, totally, and you'd have to go into the room with them, and you'd have to have a conversation about commissions and effectively show them how to treat you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
So within a company, who do you target?
We definitely target the most senior people. If we're working
Right, but
on
is that
like
CEO,
a
COO?
CEO, COO, CFO,
Okay.
those would be the ones. I mean, I personally like to go to the CEO first, because office space is a reflection of the vision of the company,
Company.
right? Like,
Yeah.
where are they going?
Yeah.
So starting there, to me, is ultimately the best. Sometimes big companies will have corporate real estate
These people.
divisions,
Yeah.
right? So you might go to those groups in the case of a large enterprise, but I don't really like to go after large enterprises. A colleague of mine refers to them as nations, and
Yeah.
penetrating a nation is like
Right.
super, super challenging. So we like to go after the tribes and the villages, the companies that are in high growth mode, where you can deal directly with the CEO or founder.
And how do you decide who they are?
What do you mean by that?
The tribes, the high growth companies,
Yeah,
how
good
do you
question. I
find
mean,
them? Where do you
yeah.
start?
Well, luckily, in a market like Toronto and in most major urban centers in North America, there's a massive technology sector that's growing.
Yeah.
Toronto is actually the number three fastest growing technology market in North America. So we have quite a large base of fast growing venture backed companies to kind of pick and choose from.
Yeah.
But I can kind of take this a little bit of a step further in terms of how I develop business.
Yep.
So I kind of saw, as I was getting into this industry, that we were moving away from conventional ways of selling. So like picking up the phone, getting a meeting, and then pitching against four other brokerages for a piece of business.
Yeah.
What's ended up happening in Toronto is the market's just moving so fast. Companies are growing so quickly that they don't really want to take the time to meet and get an update on the market, right? Like,
Yeah.
they want to get right into the deal, often because they are reacting to their real estate needs. So you can't go about it the old school way. So I've done two things to generate better penetration with my sort of prospect base. The first is I've developed some partnerships with organizations that are really connected to my prospects. So we sponsor Deloitte's Technology Fast 50 Awards program, where
Yeah.
each year they meet with about 400, 500 companies across Canada that are in really high growth mode for this award. And so now, as a sponsor, CBRE gets to be part of the team that meets these companies every year as well. We sit in front of the founders, they tell us exactly where the business is headed, and that allows us a much more unique opportunity to reach back out, because we know them and we've found out some really relevant information about where they're headed, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of one way I've gone about doing it. And then another is piggybacking off of this really amazing, program that we're part of. We created this platform. It's called CBRE Forward. And the intention behind it is to actually act as a PR agent at CBRE and tell the stories, amplify the stories of these companies. And what I've found that's really done for us, and we do this through social media like LinkedIn, videos, like sort of feature related content. What I've found is that when we are not at a point where they have a transaction to do, how do you create rapport? You
Yeah.
can't really get, like, everyone's a prospect in commercial real estate. It's just a question of when,
When it's a time-based
right?
business. Yeah.
It's a time-based business. So this allows you to actually generate rapport at a point in time when they just are like, sorry, I don't have a need, right?
Right.
So we've leveraged our connection with the Deloitte Fast 50 program, picking the companies that we know are not our customers, but that are in high growth mode.
Yeah.
And then we connect them into our CBRE Forward platform and do something for them by telling their story. And I've found that that's been an amazing way for me to bridge the gap in between needs.
Cool. And
Yeah.
So what are the signals when it is time, other than they call you?
That's a great question. Um, so, in the case of a tech company, you might follow
Funding
their
or
venture, their investment,
job openings?
job openings, things like that. Um, I mean, ultimately, when you're not working in the really high growth sector, you do in one way, shape, or form have to do that sort of heavy lifting of picking up the phone and effectively qualifying where the company is at.
Yeah.
Information gathering, right? Like there's two guys that just joined my team right now, and they're in the process of building their own book of business. And the first 6 9 months of their job is really just fact finding, right?
Right.
Especially because we have no centralized CRM. So they're out there literally just picking up information.
Yeah. Like I can see on LinkedIn Navigator, you can see their hiring pattern. And then you could probably find out how many square feet they have today, figure out the number of employees divided into the square feet. It's like when people have a kid, right? That's probably
Yeah,
a trigger to buy a house,
yeah,
right? Or there's a funeral, that's a trigger to sell a house,
yeah, for sure.
right?
For sure. And I mean, obviously, yeah, like growth and headcount, where they're going, that's so pivotal. And I kind of go back to this example of the Fast 50 program, right?
Right.
Like across Canada, we're meeting 400 or 500 companies, and they're telling us exactly where they are headed. I actually took it a bit of a step further, like talking about how we're sort of like an enterprise within an enterprise, or entrepreneurs, right? Working for a large organization. I sort of founded this platform. I got Deloitte Fast 50 as a sponsorship, and I've arranged a fee sharing kind of partnership with other markets, right? So in Montreal and in Vancouver and Calgary, I've got someone that's going and meeting all these companies there, and as a result of me kind of opening the door for them, I've got revenues coming to me through that relationship that I've built.
How about like recruiters? Because they have the inside scoop and they know who's hiring. And when there's like a huge, 25 to 50 people, that's going to trigger, more space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Those guys can be helpful. Venture capital people can be really, really helpful.
Yeah.
The key thing though is you need to, typically when someone finds out that information, it's often too late.
Too late. Yeah.
Like commercial real estate's such a relationship business, and ultimately, I actually find that I'm the one who knows these things if I'm in, if I'm in there at the right time before the recruiters, before the VC people,
Yeah.
because we're following up a lot of the time over like a 12 to 36 month period trying to get a deal. Like the longest it's taken me to get a deal has been like 4 years.
Right.
Like you start a relationship and there's no need, there's no need, there's no need, there's no need, and 4 years later, you're at the table pitching.
And how do you sustain that relationship without pestering them?
Yeah, that's a real delicate balance. I find that being highly empathetic
Yeah.
and being someone that people want to hang out with on a personal level
Right.
is a really, really important thing that you need as a commercial real estate agent. Like you have to have somebody who wants to go and have lunch with you,
Well,
do a
yeah.
bit of an update on what's going on with the company, but has enough of an interest in actually just speaking to you as a person.
Yeah.
That's how I've gone about it.
And has WeWork been a thorn in your side?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love that you brought up WeWork. So WeWork has turned the commercial real estate industry fully on its head.
Yeah.
They've effectively responded to what customers want, which is outsourcing everything, right?
Yeah.
They want to outsource all of the construction, all of the culture creation, and they want flexibility in their lease terms. This isn't a novel idea. It's been around for 30 years. A company called IWG Group or
Right.
Regis has been doing it
Regis. Yeah.
forever, but they've just done it in a kind of
And an
boring way,
old
right?
fashioned.
So
Yeah.
WeWork came around and just responded to the new age customer demand. And interestingly, it's been right now, it's been really awesome. We are working with these co-working companies, helping them expand rapidly.
Yeah.
So in the case of myself, I work with a company called Convene, who is in the space of flexible office. And I'm helping them enter the Toronto market where we're looking for, 5 locations of 100,000 square feet. So it's some significant blocks of space. So I'm working with them on that side. And then we tend to also work with these organizations on the fill side as well. So we help them as an outside sales team.
Yeah.
So far there's been tons of fees to go around with the rise of the co-working or flexible sector. But what's the verdict is out on is, will there be more of a direct to consumer connection between these companies as time goes on, because they're a lot more transparent around what they charge, and there's not
Right.
this like sort of opaqueness about how to find the opportunity, right? So for the medium and longer term, I'm kind of wondering, what is the role of the commercial real estate advisor?
Well, certainly, with their business model has been kind of blown up, from a public standpoint. They can't go public. I mean, they got bailed out by SoftBank and the CEO
Yeah,
got ousted.
yeah.
So somebody's going to try and fix that.
Hmm.
So they have worked with people like yourself in the past?
Yeah, they work with CBRE.
Yeah.
Like I said, on the side of their continued expansion, although that expansion is on hold right now. But they work with the brokerage community to find space. And then in the same regard, when they're looking to fill that space with the likes of an enterprise like Salesforce.com is represented by CBRE or one of the competitors. And
Okay.
now we're back at the table negotiating with them as well on that side.
Okay. So there's
Yeah.
still a role there for you. Well, what's the hardest part of your job?
I mean, the hardest part of the job, I think, is just finding a way to create a need to speak, right? Like,
Yeah.
I could tell you that these headphones, are no good, and you should consider AirPods that are wireless. And I could go through the process of, we could figure out whether you had a need for that, and I could tell you why it's so great. But in the case of real estate, there's only a few triggers for a need, right? It's growth, shrinking, natural lease expiry, or new market entry, right? If
Right.
one of those things are not happening,
And
you could
there's
be
not
the
a
best
need.
salesperson in the world, and you're just never going to get interest from the client.
But you need to have them want to speak with you. Like you described somebody who they enjoy going to lunch with.
Hmm. Yes.
How do you do that? Because a lot of reps have a hard time not talking about themselves, their company, their product, what it does, as
Yeah.
opposed to what the other person cares about.
So I find that I like to share a little bit about myself at the beginning of a relationship. I'm willing to get personal with people. I don't do it as a tactic, like it's something that I genuinely get something from. And what I find is that by being that way, I get a lot of that in return. And I'm cognizant of not dominating the conversation in that regard, but using it as a way to create the basis of a more intimate relationship. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because that's ultimately what you need to do. You need to get to the point of, like, it's not romantic intimacy, but it's
Well,
intimacy that you really need to get.
right. Because they've got 5 to 15 cards or contacts. And when the need does arise, they need to call you versus taking the first call that comes to them. They got to want to
Totally.
work with you.
Absolutely. And of course, in conjunction with this sort of empathetic, humanized approach that I'm describing, you of course have to be a market expert. You have to find opportunities to deliver information that might be of value to that prospect along the journey of converting them. And like, that just comes with being thoughtful, right? Like, you don't
Yeah.
just dump like market data on people. You tailor it. You think of ways that it's meaningful for them, right?
Yeah.
And then, you are one of the best at this, and I'm honestly following suit, and you've been a bit of an inspiration for me. Like, LinkedIn and doing video is such an amazing way to expose who you are to
Right.
your prospect
Yeah.
community, right? And it allows you to provide sound bites of value to them,
Yeah.
that they can just absorb. And I tell the guys on my team that are starting, like, that's, you can use that in replace of your fourth cold call or call into that
Right.
client when you don't have something meaningful to say, right? Like, send them a direct message on LinkedIn with your video saying, hey, thought you might find this of interest. Tag them in a post, right?
Right.
Engage with their content, what matters to them, right? Like, it's not all about like cold calling and just like, hey, here's a market update. Think of other ways to generate rapport.
Right. Yeah. Because the call with just a market update, it's boring. You have to be able to talk about what they care about,
Hmm.
and you don't know what they care about in some cases. They might care about what their competitors are doing, what their neighbors are doing, what new buildings are available, things to avoid, things to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, most of these companies, they care about uh, talent retention and attraction, right?
Yeah.
So the more that you can speak to them about that, and be, maybe even be a connection for them. Like I get people hired all the time, right? Like
Right.
I find out who are CEOs looking for, what kind of roles are they looking to fill. As a commercial real estate agent, you actually have the unique opportunity of knowing a lot of companies out there, knowing what their hiring kind of might be like. So also don't think of the job just as a transaction, right? And trying to get to that transaction. Like, how can you be value add to them in other ways, right? So like
Right.
CBRE Forward is an example of that. Finding a way to get someone hired is another. Connecting them to venture capital money. Like, there's so many avenues that you can add value to that relationship.
Right. Because, and it's also a word of mouth business, because if
Yeah.
somebody gets around, is hiring, what do? They ask their buddy or their friend, who have you used to get great office space? Who knows what they're doing?
You're so right. And so because of the nature of our sales cycle being so long, like 12 to 36, even longer months, I was finding that very frustrating at the beginning of my career. I was like waiting for like a referral. Like, when the hell am I going to get a referral? It took me years to start getting referrals,
Yeah.
right? Like, because it really is tied to the nature of the sales cycle. Now, a lot of my business is based on that. And I've noticed that it's even amplified further by the fact that I'm deciding to put content out on LinkedIn.
Right.
You know, like I don't know how to say, I joke about this because I don't want it to sound egotistical, but I'm like an explorer right now on LinkedIn in my industry. I'm like Christopher Columbus or something. Like, nobody is doing content on LinkedIn in my industry. It's a very slow moving
Well,
industry, very backwards.
well, the problem is that there are people who do it, but they're putting out, it's just like a sales page.
Oh my God. Yeah. 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 So you've
Right. And
seen
it's
it.
like,
Have you
who
seen this stuff?
cares? Like,
Yeah.
somebody
Have
gets
you?
an award. I don't care you got an award, or I don't
Yeah.
care that, you know,
I'm
no one,
so glad that you say this, because you're right. They're not, no one's really doing video. They are posting pictures of an available listing that they have
right.
for sale or for lease, right? Or like, I just did this deal, and I completely agree with you. It is such crap. Like, you need to put out content like what you do, which is sound bites of value.
Right.
That's, I like, how many times I've copied one of your videos into a message to my team, and I'm like, watch this, right? That's what people need to get on the
Right.
receiving end.
You either
Yeah.
make fun of something with a little
Yeah.
story or a lesson, or you
Yeah.
try and teach something, but you have
Yeah.
to do it in an entertaining way, because nobody really wants tip of the day. They
Yeah.
want like 80% entertainment and 20% gold. Like, I
Yeah.
never
So
thought of the problem that way.
I like what you're saying. And frankly, like, I have a little bit of a ways to go in that area, because I don't feel as comfortable with the comedy that you do. You know what I mean? Like, I love it. And frankly, it does keep me more engaged.
Yeah.
Currently, I'm more doing like, here's the value. And, I'm getting decent engagement from it, but I'd love to get to a higher level. I don't think that I'll ever get to the level of someone like you, because what I'm talking about is pretty niche. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
Well,
don't know, maybe you disagree, but, and if you do, please tell
I
me
don't
how.
know. I mean, is anything more boring than sales? Right? It's like you've got to like comp plans and,
I guess you're right
crazy
about that. Yeah.
KPIs. It's like I make fun of the silliness of sales.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. That's
I
fair.
mean, you can make
Yeah.
fun of the silliness of real estate, right? It's like, you know,
Yeah. I should think about how to do it, how to lighten the mood a
this
little bit.
lease is too short. Do you have anything thicker? Something.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Or how, annoying, cold calls can be, or, people who call you, ask you the same question they asked you a week ago. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good point. I definitely admire what you're doing, and I watch it. And the thing I think you just got to be cognizant of is you do have to be yourself as well,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Right.
if you're like, you have such a comedic style to you, and I have an element of it. I don't think it's the same as yours, but you can't
You can't
manufacture
copy
these
somebody
things.
else. Right. Yeah. You got
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
yourself.
Yeah.
Now, what was it like? I guess you were used to commission only, but I bet a lot of people in your business wash out the first year.
Yeah, there's quite a turnover in the first 12 to 24 months.
Yeah.
The reason for it is, typically you'll get a salary for the first year of being in sales. It's not a draw against your commission, it's a salary.
Yeah.
Some cases you actually won't. But because the sales cycle is so long, it can really take about 3 years before you start to have a
Wow.
sustainable revenue base.
So it's
right?
like starting your own business.
Yeah, effectively. And people just don't have the ability to wait it out. Either they're not
Right.
patient, they're maybe too young, they don't have the maturity,
The
money is a
overhead.
factor,
Yeah.
yeah, overhead costs, whatever. But the thing that's crazy, like I hear you talk on your podcast all the time about, if you're a top performer in sales, do you want to make 500,000 a year? That's the number I hear you throw around all the time, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't. I've tried to understand the software game and see sort of what the ceiling looks like. In my observation, it seems to be roughly 1 million. Is that, like, just to use a general number? Like, is
Yeah.
that
I mean, there's one person in my course that did 2.4, but
okay?
that's very unusual,
Right. So, like
and I
on
had,
average, yeah,
yeah, on average, you're talking probably 250
a top performer. Like, what is it on average top performer making?
in enterprise sales, well over three.
Well over three. Okay.
Three was a
So
bad year for me.
So in my industry, so let's just say at my company, the cutoff for the top 45 performers in the country, which is the trip that they send you on if you get there. Last year, the cutoff for that was probably something like 850,000. So
Whoa.
45th made 850,000,
Yeah.
and number one in the company probably made more than 5 million.
Yeah. So it's like your own business.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, I'm not mentioning these things for, like, like dramatic effect. It's more just to show that, like, you asked the
It's
question
there.
about drop off. People drop off, but if you can wait it out and you've got a pulse, you can actually make between 3 and 500 grand in this business. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, there are people that just have a pulse
Yeah.
that are making $500,000 in commercial real estate.
And are you guys, well, it's probably different in Canada. In the US, it's 1099.
Our healthcare is actually quite good in most cases.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you just have to kind of wait it out. That's the key to this business. And I think a lot of people leave too early. I kind of knew it from poker, right? Like, you'd be doing the right thing in poker, making the right decisions, but because there's luck involved in it, you can go on stretches
Right.
where you're losing, even though you can genuinely evaluate your performance to be good, right? So I kind of had that mentality as a backbone, and I think that it really did help me sort of stand the test of time.
Right. Yeah. Because, you know, when I went out on my own, I went from, having a great base salary and, a lot of, expense account, credit card, never paid for anything, to all of a sudden I paid for everything. Nothing came in unless I made it happen.
Yeah.
And it's pretty scary at times.
Absolutely. And then I think that I touched on this maybe when we were talking just a minute before the call. Um, this industry is one where you have to take the whole sales process from the cradle all the way to the grave,
Yeah.
which is uncommon from my understanding. I've never worked in software, but from my understanding, there's a BD person, there's someone who actually pitches the business, then there's an account manager. There's at least three people that are in that chain. Is that
Some
right or wrong?
sometimes, and that's usually on the lower end. Usually, you do have help,
Hmm.
but it's not as cushy as it sounds. It's not like, oh, somebody
Okay.
hands you something.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. Okay.
they get somebody to show up.
Well, I've just heard from sales reps say, like, "Oh, once I make the sale, like, I'm out. Like, I don't, like, I'm back to going and finding and
Well,
minding. I don't know. That's what I've heard.
it can be if there's no repeat business, but most of the time, repeat business is the easy business. So
Yeah,
you have to stay engaged, even though somebody else may be responsible.
yeah.
They
Well, I
still
think,
call you.
like, yeah, and I think, like, maybe it's just that it's a little bit less structured in commercial real estate, right? Like,
Yeah,
you don't walk into a system, like, we don't even have a centralized CRM, right? So, like,
right. It's
you if
cowboys.
yeah, like, the only way to truly create a sustainable business where you can go from, like, 1 plus 1 equals 3 is to actually build that base infrastructure inside of your own team, right?
Right.
So I can maybe elaborate a little bit on what that looks like for us. So my partner and I, we are the equity holders in the business. We're 50-50 partners. We have three salespeople that work with us. And there's the value exchange that's occurring at the moment is we are teaching them the business. They are drumming up opportunities.
Yeah.
And we're sharing in their revenues 50-50. And as time goes on, they start to share in our revenues as there's a money value exchange to be
So it's
had,
like a
right?
law firm, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess kind of like that. Yeah. And then there's a few key pieces to the puzzle that need to be there. So we have a transaction manager, someone that we sort of say does the meat in the sandwich. They're the ones that work with the client on day to day. stuff when we're actually negotiating a deal, because deals can take months to negotiate, right? Like you're
Yeah.
looking for space and then you're putting out RFPs on multiple locations. Like the whole process can take quite a bit of time. So if you don't have someone that's helping you with the meat of the sandwich, you can't go get new clients
Right.
or maintain relationships with past clients so that the revenue machine just keeps on flowing, right? So
Cool.
that's how we've set up our team to ensure that we, as salespeople, we have time to go and build relationships and drive revenue.
Cool. Hey, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to follow you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is definitely on LinkedIn, David Cairns on LinkedIn. And like I said, I post video content. If you're interested in real estate, I'd love to hear from you.